My dad was half
happened?
Chinese and half Hawaiian, and my mother is Swedish.
Wow. Like Queen?
Singapore, Colin's wedding.
She drowned herself in the sea. God, too much of a stereotype. These are Madame Butterfly and Miss Saigon. Get out of that team, please. Up to now, it just repeated and repeat and repeat.
I actually have a friend who does drag that's inspired by Madame Butterfly, and their drag name is Mahjong Butterfly.
Well, I learned Madame Butterfly later on. I heard about it, but I didn't see the movie when I was in the Philippines. I don't have access.
As far as like the storyline where white dude comes over and like, basically pays to marry an Asian woman, as far as in like media, I can't think of anything, but in real life, mail order brides, as we call them, especially in the Philippines, I would not be surprised if it's, been something that's been used in like other forms of media, like adult films and things like that. I'm sure it's definitely in there under like the race play kink and things like that.
Is a short story by an American author. Their name is John Luther Long. It circulates around a Japanese girl who falls in love with an American sailor. Eventually, this does turn into a 3-act opera by Giacomo Puccini. They are an Italian composer, and after gaining the rights to the story and to turn it into an opera, Puccini actually even visited Nagasaki, Japan with the wife of a Japanese ambassador who actually visited Italy and sang Japanese folk songs to him. So that's how they were able to meet. So a lot of the sheet music, how they portrayed this, was through a lot of research of even going to Japan.
Like, yes, you can do your research to make things as authentic as possible, to make sure this is in line with the culture, you're staying true to the story. Producers can't be completely true to the story if you're not actually hiring like Asian identifying like actors and actresses.
100 years later, after this has been circulating as a movie, a storyline, and even in a theater play, are you aware of any controversies that the storyline Mother Butterfly might be called out for?
Well, the controversy came up already during Miss Saigon. The Filipino women's movement was already in its height. There's a movement called Gabriela who studied really the role of women and Asian women and how Asian women is being fetishized. Miss Saigon is the total new version of Madame Butterfly. Pick up a story of a woman and make the white man the hero.
Here we see Cho-Cho-san is played by a white female actor, Mary Pickford. You see that they are wearing Japanese clothing. Her parents are both white actors as well. You get the same white male troupe. The hero, Lieutenant Pinkerton, the American naval officer, eventually falls in love with Cho-Cho-san, but then leaves her, goes back to America, marries a white lady, comes back with his new wife, takes the son away, and then Cho-Cho-san commits suicide. Yeah, we see similarities in the storylines again and again of the Asian woman as a docile maiden in distress. So there's Orientalism that poses that Asia and the East are different and exotic, and therefore, people want to go in and take parts of the cultures, which also leads to cultural appropriation. They, as someone who are not from that culture, can pick and choose what they want. And that leads into Yellowface, where we have these white actors. They aren't able to portray them in the right way. Goes into different stereotypes like an Asian doll, where Asian women are sexualized, viewed as childlike, and then the American exceptionalism with the white savior. With all these different controversies and setbacks with this film, what were better ways that maybe Hollywood could have done to improve Madame Butterfly, the storyline, or even get away from Yellowface?
I mean, as far as what Hollywood can do better is, hire more Asian actors, hire more Asian talent. It helps to have more consultants and like people who actually do represent the culture that's, being depicted in the film or the production.
The whole power capacity of making film. They have the funding, they have all the technology, and they have the arrogance of course ownership. If Hollywood could be very honest and truthful, and if you want to tell a story of a race, why don't you go give it to these people and tell their own story? So Hollywood has to dismantle its own racism.
Even though this came out in 1915, we still have the storyline of Madame Butterfly. And then it stems also to Miss Saigon, which is another play that is still on Broadway. Even though there are a lot of controversies, why might this continue to be a storyline that is still highly circulated?
I'm actually not that surprised that's lasted like over 100 years. As you know, a lot of mainstream media today is geared towards like, white folks. I also can see how it's lasted so long, especially with birth of like ethnic studies across the country, like Asian American studies, for example. I can see how it's a double-edged sword. I imagine professors have said, go watch this show or like read about this and then like, write a paper about it. Let's discuss it in class.
It became classic. The world is so educated to accept the composer. Nobody realized that it is actually destroying a race. And it's an anti-Asian woman. It's anti-women. Totally, Madame Butterfly should be banned, just like Miss Saigon.
Is that Japanese guy wearing a false teeth just to look Asian?
Have you seen Breakfast at Tiffany's before, or the character, Mr. Yunioshi?
I haven't seen the movie.
I'm not familiar with.
Well, he's supposed to be the eccentric Asian man who just disrupt because he's being disturbed by people in his building.
Breakfast at Tiffany's came out in 1961, and it's an American romantic comedy filmed, directed by Blake Edwards, and it's written by George Azelroyd. It was adapted by a book written by Truman Capote, also named Breakfast at Tiffany's, and it stars Audrey Hepburn as Holly Golightly, a naive, eccentric cafe society girl who falls in love with a struggling writer. This movie, it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards and it won 2. It was nominated for 6 Grammy Awards and it won 5. And in 2012, the film was selected to be a preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, as they deemed that this movie is culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. This is another example of Yellowface that we see in Hollywood. The actor is Mickey Rooney. They are a white actor who is playing a Japanese artist, Mickey Rooney, who was really popular as a child star, as they played a lot of characters that were wholesome or wisecracking, and they're also smaller in stature, so they were easy to play off a lot of child roles. However, as they grew older, they weren't able to get the popularity they had when they were younger. Eventually, he started to play roles that were the midget con man or comedy roles, but no longer the main character. They did a lot to have a white actor look to be of Asian descent.
Yeah, so first thing that stood out to me is the fact that he's intentionally squinting to make his eyes look smaller. I think also the way that his eyebrows are done to make it look like he's always angry. You could hear like, he's pretty much like yelling or screaming almost the entire way through, which I think is a way of showing as immigrants, we're aggressive, we're always loud, we're always angry.
They're trying to feature a Japanese person, but his accent give it away that he's not Asian.
The one thing that stood out to me the most was the prosthetics inside his mouth, like for his teeth, to make him look like buck tooth.
It's a stereotype too that Asians has back.
Going back to like the old fashioned comics where like they always made like Asian people like having like 2 front teeth, like 2 buck teeth.
Other things that Mickey Rooney or the director purposely had the character act like is a temperamental toddler and a brainless fool. So you see, whenever he wakes up, he's always bumping his head on his light. I don't think any person, regardless of where you're from, would have put a light fixture there.
It's not just a light fixture, it's showing some sort of a lantern.
They chose to have that there, so there a Japanese artist lives there. Jeff Yang, who is a Wall Street Journal columnist, coined Mickey Rooney's portrayal of Mr. Yunioshi in Breakfast at Tiffany's as the godfather of Ching Chong's stereotype. It goes into different political and American culture norms that Asian men, the Asian immigrant, are a threat to American culture, and it pivots into yellow peril, which refers to East Asians, Chinese in particular, that they're a threat to Western society and values. For the Library of Congress to deem that Breakfast at Tiffany's is a culturally, aesthetically American piece of work, for them to, archive it, but then they have the character as Mr. Yunioshi, who's played by a white male on these stereotypes, is it almost like a political stance to pin Asians as the foreigners and a threat to American society?
How stupid could Librarian of Congress do that? That it's actually a racist character they're putting up. What kind of supremacy?
This did come out in 1961, so it's just a decade or two after World War II and the Japanese internment camps. There are Asians in America, Japanese Americans, that they could have casted for this role, but why do you think they might have chosen a white actor to Yellowface?
I'm thinking about World War II, internment camps. These people are traumatized. I can't say for sure if many people wanted to go into acting or into the entertainment business.
Because once you're gonna break to an Asian actor, those are real. And then you will lose market for a white person. So they have to maintain the white world in movies.
I also imagine that a lot of theater academies weren't taking Asian applicants because this is still just right before the civil rights movement.
The story for the white people who created the story is theirs.
As a child of immigrants, a lot of them didn't come to this country for jobs in entertainment. We'll take whatever job we can get, whether it's factory work, whether it's menial labor, or folks who are working in healthcare, law, engineering, go for what's tried and true, what is stable, what is safe.
If by chance we were to make a new rendition of Breakfast at Tiffany's in 2024 and Mr. Yunioshi is still a character, what are some ways that we can do justice?
Trying our best to cast a Japanese actor or Japanese American actor.
I'll just change the whole story into an Asian play and then make Yunioshi a white man. It will just smell the food of the Asians, becoming curious. What is that smell that I smell in the morning? That's not coffee. To let me taste the food that I smell every morning. So it will be more cultural and educational.